this. He is the creator, the game designer behind Qbert, Joust 2, Terminator 2, Revolution X. And here's the thing, guys. He is the star of the show. Dan was the star of the show a few minutes ago. This is about them. So I'm going to let him run this. I'm just going to ask a few questions. If you guys have questions in the comments.
Pressure.
Yeah, you shouldn't. This is, here's the thing. And Warren, I was just talking with you about this. A lot of the people that watch us and a lot of the people out there that are so involved in retro games, their lives, and you said this was a heavy thing for us. It was a joyful thing because our lives were changed by the better, or for the better, by that retro video games. That whole culture, just escaping, having fun, being able to enjoy something regardless of the circumstances. So you are here with a book, and obviously some posters and things like that as well, but a book called Creating Qbert, right?
Correct.
All right. Talk to me a little bit, not just about the book, but about the experience behind that. Qbert's a huge name. I mean...
Yeah, well, interestingly, none of us working in making games back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, we really believed that we were making anything lasting in popular culture. We felt we were making disposable entertainment. We wanted it to be fun, surely, but nobody expected it to last more than a year.
Really?
Because you make your game and then it's on to the next one. And video games were new. New video games came out every month, sometimes every week.
Right.
And there were so many new things coming out. You just assume your game comes out, either it's a success or it's not. But either way, it's on. If it's not a success, it's gone in 3 weeks. If it's a success, maybe it's around for 6 months or a year.
Right.
So none of us really thought this is something that's going to stay forever. So when people come to me, as you just did, and say that this is something that meant something very deep to your life and the entertainment and the fun you had, whatever you escaped, that is not something that falls on deaf ears or anything. That means a tremendous amount to me. Never knowing that, never feeling that that was something going on. We didn't know. But to hear that years later, it's a feeling that is beyond words. So it means a lot to me. And people do tell me that occasionally, and it always means a lot to me. I don't even know how to respond beyond words.
Well, and Justin said it perfectly in the comments. He said disposable entertainment is what they make now. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And not that there aren't those big blow-up video games that really make it, or movies, whatever that entertainment venue is.
Yeah.
But retro, there was less opportunity. Anybody can make a game and release it on Steam now.
Right, that's true, yeah. Well, the thing is, I find that the video game business and the movie business are just so similar. Because you think about all the movies that get made, and all the movies that have been made over decades and decades, maybe a tiny fraction. Many of them really were forgotten. Maybe some of those will be rediscovered at some point.
Right.
Because I do think a lot of really good movies have just fallen by the wayside. People have forgotten all about them. And you hope that someday somebody's going to really appreciate something that was actually maybe ahead of its time, that people didn't appreciate in its day. So I think, I consider myself just fortunate. Qbert was very successful from the instant it came out. It was my first game. I wasn't prepared for that success. It didn't go to my head because nobody knew who I was. I was just some guy, I remember going to arcades and watching people play it. And I would always think, say, hey, that's my game. I made that game. But,
That's awesome.
But they don't know me. I could be anybody saying that's my game.
Right.
Usually I did not say that. But it was very rewarding to see people play it and enjoy it. I should also point out I didn't make it by myself.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I worked with an artist named Jeff Lee, who was, who was a genius, and created all the characters, had many of the ideas that made it into the game, and a sound guy named Dave Field, who is still working in the pinball world today.
Oh,
And he
neat.
also, I consider a genius. And the thing is, I wasn't so arrogant. It was my first game. I wasn't so arrogant to think I knew everything. I didn't. I knew nothing, I felt. So I was just trying to, take ideas from people that I thought made sense, were fun, and make a game that I thought was fun. That was pretty much where I was coming from. And apparently it worked.
And here's the thing that I've discovered about video games. I've ventured into trying to like kind of create stuff with tools that already exist, things like RPG Maker, stuff like that.
Right.
There's a lot of complexity to something that many times people just don't think about. You play the video game, you enjoy it, you put your quarters in the machine, you pay your, $50 or whatever, $70 now, it's crazy. But and you just play and you go, hey, this is cool. This is it's a lot of fun. I'm out. But there's so much complexity behind this, and to have success to that complexity, that's got to be rewarding. At least in
Yeah, it was extremely rewarding. I mean, again, all the way through. Cuba was never a design. It was never planned. It was what I call an evolutionary design, in that it started as a programming exercise. I was just trying to teach myself certain programming techniques, and then it evolved. And
that's awesome.
every step only happened after the previous step was completed. So
that's cool.
The first thing was I had a ball bouncing down a pyramid.
Yeah.
I was just teaching myself randomness and gravity, how to program those things. And then the next thing was, maybe we should have a character jumping around. So then I had to program the character jumping around. Then I had to program him avoiding the balls, and I had to do collision detection. Oh, maybe somebody should chase him. It was literally just one thing at a time, and nothing really happened until the last thing was completed. And then I would ask, what should I do next? And that's how it evolved. So, it was an unusual process, but one that I like. It's like you start with an idea. And in this case, the idea was that you're jumping on a pyramid of cubes. That was a unique and new idea. But then it's like, well, what do you do with that? So anyway, all the, and again, it was my first game. I didn't want to make it too complicated, so I was always trying to keep things simple. I liked the idea that you could play it with one hand. I didn't want to have a whole bunch of buttons that did different things.
I like it though. I mean, simplicity is underrated. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And also I wanted something that involved not just reactions, but strategy. You have to think. One thing I tell people about Cuba, if they're struggling, is that there are times, it's not about moving all the time. There are times you just want to sit on a cube and let things happen around you. Mm-hmm. So, it does require a little bit of strategy and thinking and thought. Anyway, it was what it was, but it was my first game, and it turned out it was a success.
Big one.
Yeah.
Well, and so I asked Dan the same question, Dan Kitchen. He was just on a little bit ago. What was the, not eureka moment, but like the moment where you go, wow, this is just so cool to be a part of this moment in life. Not even, and look, it's video games, so we're not expecting to make history. We just want to do something that people are gonna enjoy and remember.
Yeah.
But what was your moment where you're like, yes, this is the moment. This is it.
Well, I gotta say, I never thought I'd be programming a video game, even though I dreamed of being able to do that. Video games were introduced, arcade machines, when I was a freshman in college. It's my first exposure, and I was studying computers. So I thought, oh my God, how do you get a job like that to make these games? And I didn't know. I thought you had to be somebody special or a genius or something. So to see an ad in a Sunday paper, they literally was advertising the Sunday
Yes.
video game hardware and software people. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I was like, wow, it's that easy. But even so, I had the point I had seen that ad, I had sort of made the choice to leave engineering. Because I had a job at Bell Laboratories, which I was a little disillusioned about, and I left that job without any prospects. So I was unemployed. I'd sort of look at the Sunday want ads. I kind of feel dirty looking at it.
Like what feels right?
You
None
said
of
you
this
weren't
feels.
going to go back to engineering, but then I looked at it, and then when I saw that, it was like, that was the thing that got me to go, oh yeah, you got to apply. But even then, it's hard for me to believe this. I had second thoughts. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it.
Yes.
But I went through the process, and I always thought to myself, look, if I don't like it, I can always quit.
Right.
Then I got hired, and I did like it, and I loved being there, and honestly, it changed my life. That decision changed my life. I can't believe I actually considered maybe not doing that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, being in that industry, and also being anonymous in that industry, because again, nobody knew who I was. We didn't get credits on our names.
Right.
So it was even going to a trade show, nobody treated me like a celebrity. I literally just was like a fly on the wall. So I guess things didn't go to my head.
But here's the thing: is you come back, and to me, you come back 30, 40 years later, and you realize that there was a difference that you made, even in one person's life. It doesn't matter who it was. It was like you made one person's life more enjoyable. That's.
It's
I think that.
it's mind-bogglingly. It's a feeling I can't explain. It's just gratitude, that I was in a position to do that. Never in a million years did I think that is something I could do. And yet it was something I always wanted to do. I always dreamed of computers. When I thought of working with computers, I always thought of working them in some form of entertainment.
Right.
Like what drove me as a child was the idea of entertaining other people in any form. I actually became an actor, although it wasn't my initial desire to be an actor. I kind of fell into it through a very strange confluence of events. But there's a satisfaction in that too. You give a performance and you can touch people with a performance.
Yeah.
So I just feel extraordinarily grateful to have had a wonderful life in this way.
So what? Tell me a little bit about your acting career. I knew that especially when the announcements start coming out with Retro World Expo about who's going to be there, things like this, and I'm thinking these guys are way out of our league. I mean, it's.
What is that?
Look, it's to put it in modern terms. It's like meeting the guys behind World of Warcraft or the Avengers movies or something like that. That's our childhood. These kind of things are our childhood. These are the moments that we remember in our lives. Couch co-op, sitting and showing our buddies how good we got at. My wife's a big fan of River Raid and Pitfall, those kind of things, and Hubert, that. Remember going to the arcades as a kid and throwing some quarters in and jumping around and lighting up the cubes. These are moments of joy for us, and you come back and it's like, what was the acting part of that, your actor career like?
So I told you I was working at Bell Laboratories, and I left Bell Laboratories. And one of the things I did when I left is I was in the suburbs of Chicago, but I moved into the city proper and started taking improv classes in Second City.
That's cool.
Because I had seen the Second City show, and I thought, I don't know if I can be an actor, but I can stand up on stage and be funny. That I can do.
Right.
But I studied for a year, took the entire program. I didn't really audition to be part of Second City. I started doing improv with a group of friends at clubs around town.
Okay.
And I did that for a couple of years. I was just doing that while I was working for Gottlieb.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and then at some point I got tired of improv, and I thought, I'm just curious about this acting thing. like actual acting. I just couldn't relate. I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I never related to it in high school. I thought all the drama kids were a little weird, didn't fit in. I was a geek, I was a nerd, I was a math guy and the computer guy in high school. So
Right.
I started to get curious about acting, and I took a program, Meister Technique it's called, and it was a 2-year program.
Okay.
And I just sort of learned what acting was about, and I connected to it, and I thought, oh, so I can do this. Now I thought I could do that. So I started doing theater in Chicago, and then all through the 80s and 90s, while I was making video games during the day, I was doing theater at night, and then sort of like rising through the ranks with all these other actors, doing commercials and short films. And, yeah, it was. It just became another thing I did. And when I moved to California, I just kept doing it.
Nice. Nice.
I actually, here's a little bit of trivia I don't talk about often. I actually worked with the Russo brothers on an episode of a TV show called LAX.
Yeah.
I was on an episode of LAX,
That's cool.
and the Russo brothers directed that episode.
It's crazy. My dad enjoyed that show. He was also a big fan of like Wings and a lot of those.
Yeah.
They weren't really. They were almost like dramedies,
Sure.
So and that's what he called them. I don't have any other word
No,
for it,
drama
but
is-
yeah.
that's a real thing.
So-
And then, when actors just want to be, actors just want work.
Right,
That's all actors
right.
want, And so, yeah, an actor will be on anything. An
Yeah.
actor doesn't care. I mean, if you reach a certain point in your career, you can start caring about stuff. Until you get there, you don't care. You'll be
Yeah.
on anything.
So I asked Dan the same question. I'll ask you. What was maybe your biggest belly flop moment? You went to dive in, and you hit your stomach instead of your, nice smooth dive.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I got two that I can think of. One
Okay.
was not my fault, and one
That's what they all say.
one,
Just
one-
kidding.
I have to
Or-
take the responsibility.
I'm sorry.
But the first one, I did a Laserdisc game called Us versus Them. And
Okay.
It was on track to be a huge success. But the industry completely crashed. The bottom came out
Yes.
of the industry specifically because Laserdisc players were discovered to be not ready for prime time. You put them in an arcade cabinet, they would overheat, they would get dusty, they
Right.
would skip, people would ask for their money back, and they really were not ready. And the arcade industry was sort of crashing before they came along. Everybody
Right.
thought Laserdiscs were going to be the saviors, and it turned out they were not. And my game sort of suffered because of that. And I was like hugely disappointed because it wasn't a bad game. In fact, it was really on track to be a huge success. It was innovative in a lot of ways. Anyway,
No, that makes sense.
that
I
was
mean,
one. But that was sort of factors outside of my control.
Right.
One where I have to maybe take a little bit more responsibility is I did a game called Exterminator for
Okay.
Premier Technologies. And, it was a new system completely. The hardware, tools, software, all developed from the ground up by me and two former Gottlieb employees.
Okay.
Jun Yum, who developed the original Gottlieb hardware.
Right.
And Kan Yamamoto, best known for a game called Mad Planets.
Right.
That he did for. Well, they started their own company, and they were hired, and I was hired separately by Premier Technologies, which was an offshoot of Gottlieb. After Gottlieb was closed down, they sort of started up pinball, but they wanted to get into video, so they hired us to make a video system. And it was really just the three of us, and then Jeff Lee got involved for art, which of course always great to have Jeff. And then another guy, Craig Beerwaltz, did the sounds. But yes, it went wrong for a lot of reasons, and some of them were mine. Some of them were my reasons. So, they only made 250. It was an arcade machine.
Right.
I think they only made 250.
Wow.
And you can still find them some places, but it's very rare.
Right. You're gonna find those in your collectors' closets and things like that. So,
I've seen 4 or 5 out in the world.
how does it feel to see that?
It's kind of cool to see them because there's so few, and I haven't seen them in so long. I actually played the game a few years ago, and I was like, oh, it's not as bad as I remember.
Right.
But yeah, at the time, there were a lot of problems.
That's, you know what though, that's part of, and we've found this out too, and what we do is simple as, you know, just going live on a Facebook page, and that takes very little super time investment, but sometimes you just flat on your face.
Yeah,
And
it happens.
you get up, you go again,
Yeah.
and the next thing might be huge. I mean, look at the IPs that you're involved in too. Terminator 2, Revolution X, of course, Cubert, Joust. You know, Warren, you were involved in Joust too. So things like that. Like, yeah, sure, you hit, you know, you fall flat on your face, but it's like you get back up, and then you see that next
Sure.
project.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know how it's in my DNA or whatever, but I've never been too thrown by failure.
Right.
You know, I'm not afraid of failure. I do believe, I'm not sure where I got this from, but I do believe failure just helps you learn. If you can learn from your
Yes.
failures, you go on to the next thing. It's like beating yourself up's not going to help. So why bother, right?
Right.
It's a
Right.
waste of energy.
And you know that actually, it takes some failures to learn that, because
yeah.
sometimes you've like those I don't know, first 10 times you fail or something, you're like, you just beat yourself up and you sit there and you sulk for, you know, anywhere from an hour to a month.
Or years sometimes.
So yeah, and that's just part of the. Unfortunately, that's part of the process, and some people never come out of that. And to be able to come out of that and say, you know, okay, I'm on to the next project. Let's go.
Right.
To me, that's huge, and we wouldn't have a lot of the retro culture into the modern culture. The modern video games and even modern acting and things like that wouldn't be present. They wouldn't exist without that retro culture. There's
Maybe. Yeah. It's possible.
that's the foundation. You know, those old games, those old, you know, shows that maybe 18 people watch now, you know, it doesn't matter. That's the foundation that all modern stuff is built on. So
I'm glad you feel that way.
I don't look what we do.
I know.
Of course I feel that.
Nobody is
I
more astonished than me about the growth of retro culture in this way. I mean, I'm very grateful about it because, like I said, I moved on from Cubert onto the next game
Right.
within a year or two, and it's I've been doing things. It wasn't until about 15 years. Imagine this, 1995-6, years after Cubert's been released, that suddenly I'm getting word about people want to talk about Cubert. Like, why? It's 15 years old. But there was, that generation grew up, remember it fondly, and they want to talk about it. So I wrote my first sort of small history of Cubert for the internet in something like 1995 or 6. And then, it was the mid-90s. New versions of old games were coming out for PC.
Yes.
So I was aware of the retro movement in the mid to late 90s.
And
it started.
And see, to me, it didn't hit me until the 2000s when I discovered, emulations, and it's like, okay, I have this cartridge, but I have no console.
Right.
How can I play the game that I love?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
my brother introduced me to emulation, and it's like, here we are, 20 years later, still playing the same games that we played 30 years ago, 35 years ago, 40 years ago.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's another thing. So right after Cubert, I made a version of Cubert called Faster, Harder, More Challenging Cubert. I made it because word was getting back to me that people were playing Cubert for hours and hours on a single port. Normally, that's not good. It turned out for Cubert, it wasn't that bad because I think it's inspired other people to play and try it.
Right.
But I got scared because it was my first game. I had made it slower and easier based on other people's feedback. And so I thought, oh God, I made it too slow and too easy. So I made this faster, harder, more challenging as a response to that, but it never got released.
Oh,
I had
man.
the ROMs in my cabinet at home for 15 years. And then in 1997, I was working at Disney Interactive. And I worked with a guy who had connections to the main people who were doing the emulators. They had a Cubert emulator, and I said, look, this is just a ROM swap. It requires no different hardware. So I gave him the ROM images, and they released it.
And here it is.
Faster, Harder, More Challenging Cubert has been around since 1997, and I'm rewarded that now it's out there.
And that's
Play it.
there's so much to the retro community. People are doing home brews now, and ROM hacks, things like that. I think there's so much room where we could grow, and I think developers are now losing. They're losing the plot. They want cheap, fast money.
Possible people did that in the 1980s, and that's when the arcade industry kind of went under. People just throwing out clones of games that were successful.
Right.
There was no imagination going into new games, or it was rare, I should say. But listen, there will always be people with imagination. There will always be people with a vision that is different, that will not. They might just take something and put a new spin on it, or they might take something and make it completely new.
Yeah.
I just came out with my first game in 20 years.
That's awesome.
And I was inspired to do it just because I had an idea for a game mechanic I'd never heard of, and it applied. A friend of mine has a Tribble license. He has a company called Tribble Toys, and he sells Tribbles, furry things you can buy.
I have one.
Really?
Yes. You press it.
That's right. So he's been bugging me for years to make a Tribble game.
That's
And
phenomenal.
I was like, yeah, I'm kind of done with that. I'm not going to do making games anymore.
Trying to make the Klingon Empire fall.
No. Because they don't have the Star Trek license. They can't do Klingons.
I was
I know.
being sarcastic.
Anyway, but so I had an idea last year, and I pitched it to him, and we developed it, and now it's available for download. Hungry Tribbles, absolutely free, downloadable for your iOS or Android.
That's all. I gotta look
And
that up.
it's a very simple
Like today.
game. You either feed Tribbles or you keep food from them. That's literally all you do. And you're trying to maintain a Tribble population. You have a target population you're trying to maintain. You feed them too much, you get too many Tribbles. If you don't feed them enough, you get too few Tribbles. It's more challenging than you might think.
That's
And it's
amazing.
fun.
I
I enjoy playing. So anyway, but that's the whole idea. It's like if you have an idea, if you're inspired to do something,
Yes.
and it's unique, but it's got to be fun. It's got to, and it's got to fit the theme. That's the other thing. It's so this mechanic fits the Tribble theme so perfect. That's what inspired me to say I'll actually make this game.
Well, and simplicity is beautiful, so
Yeah,
I love
I'm a
it.
big fan of that.
So, Warren, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Developer of one of the developers and designers of Cubert, programmer, author, actor. Check him out. If you're here at RWX, stop by the booth. If you're not, do you have a website, anything we could visit and get that up and
I do
running?
have a website. It's called Warren Davis Shop. .square.site, S-I-T-E, and the reason I have that is I sell my book autographed. You can buy my book on Amazon, but if somebody wants an autographed copy, that's and they can't see me at a show, that is one way to get my book.
And it's a piece of history, guys. So, show the love. Thank you so much again,
Yeah,
Warren.
my
I
pleasure.
greatly appreciate your time.
You bet.
Guys, come back. More ReTV. Go see Wheels the Deal here. He's on as well. Much love. Thank you, Warren. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.